Hi, it's Danny again. Today, I'm going to give you a presentation that will review the information we've covered in the last couple of weeks. Pay attention closely. When we get together, we will have a game show style review session. You want to do well at that, don't you? I know you do. Project Search UTMC Remote Learning Review Session 5. What we have learned during the last 2 weeks. We learned about arrogance versus confidence. It's very important to have confidence, but to have arrogance is really not going to do you any favors. So I want to emphasize how to be confident. Always remember that you have value as a person. Believe in yourself enough to admit when you've made mistakes. Compliment others when they are doing a good job. Help others when you can. Don't judge or blame others when things go wrong. If you can do these things, then you can be confident but not arrogant. So remember that an arrogant person does not admit when they're wrong, and they very seldom compliment other people, and they very rarely help others. Confident people will do all those things because they believe in themselves. We covered communicating with your supervisor. We talked about strategies for talking to your supervisor about things that might not be very easy to talk about. Our strategies included to make a list, request a meeting, share any ideas for a solution that you might have, ask your supervisor for their advice, and then sometimes simply ask the supervisor for their help. So those were our 5 tips for communicating with your supervisor about something that might be tough to talk about. On another day, we talked about the importance of empathy in the workplace. You can practice the steps of empathy every day. You can practice with your family members, your friends, and your fellow interns. Now, the way to get started practicing your empathy is to use these 4 steps. Try to see things from the other person's point of view. You may recall I showed a picture of 2 people, it was a cartoon of 2 people looking at a number that was laying on the floor between them. And because of where they were standing, one person thought it was a 9 and the other thought it was a 6. So if you try to see things from the other person's point of view, you might realize why they have the opinions they have and why their opinions differ from yours. Also acknowledge that the other person's opinion is as valid as your own, meaning that their opinion is just as worthy as your own to be expressed and for them to have that opinion in the first place. Examine your attitude. Are you being open and are you being understanding with others when you interact with them? Do you insist on having your own way all the time? Or are you willing to listen to other people's ideas and collaborate? And then listen actively. That's very important for empathy. When you listen actively, you make eye contact. Your body language is such that you are facing the person who's speaking and you are giving them feedback verbally by saying things like, I understand, or I see, or okay, you know, talking back with them basically. So doing all those things will help you to be more empathetic in the workplace, which in the long run will really help you in your career. We practiced the elevator speech. So there were certain rules that I laid out there to remember for when you develop your elevator speech. It should be about 20 to 30 seconds in length. An elevator ride usually is pretty short. So that's the reason why your elevator speech needs to be short. You might not have much time to talk to the person about whatever it is you're talking to them about, whether it's Project Search or if it's in the future and you have a different job or a different project you're working on. Start with the most important facts so that you don't leave any of the big things out and run out of time to tell the person about those big things. Speak in your natural voice or be yourself. So you don't have to be fancy. Don't try to make it sound overly complicated. Just keep it simple and you can do it. The importance of self-esteem to your health and success. We spent a day talking about the impact that your self-esteem or your self-image has on your health. People with high self-esteem take responsibility for their mistakes. People with low self-esteem are going to blame others for their mistakes. It's similar to the confidence versus arrogance here. Arrogant people often do have low self-esteem, in fact. People with high self-esteem feel happy and capable of success, but people with low self-esteem feel insecure and fear failure. When you have high self-esteem, you are happy to take on new challenges and try new tasks and new hobbies and so on. But a person with low self-esteem would likely avoid trying new things for fear of failure. These are only a few of the impacts self-esteem has on people's lives. And we talked about how do you raise your self-esteem if you think it's low. Well, for one thing, you can try exercising, eating the right foods, so that way you'll feel better physically and you'll start to feel better about yourself. And believe in yourself enough to go and try new things and accept that when you do try new things, accept the fact that you sometimes are going to make mistakes at your new things that you try. And that happens to everybody. So if you do all those things, that should help you raise your self-esteem. What not to say at a job interview. We spent one session talking about this concept. And so there were the big four things that we covered in that session, which were, I have had other interviews and I'm considering other offers. That's a really bad idea to say because it can make the interviewer think that you aren't really taking it very seriously. It may make them think that you are arrogant or conceited or something not very good like that. You shouldn't say, well, I have to take a drug test, or what types of drugs do you test for, or anything like that. Don't bring up the drug test unless you are asked about it. So some employers will have drug tests and others won't. And if they bring it up and say, we do require drug screening, or are you willing to take a drug screen, you always say yes. Otherwise, don't bring it up. You don't say, I have no weaknesses. That shows that you maybe don't have enough insight to know what your weaknesses are, because it's just true that everybody has them. Instead, you want to come up with a weakness that you genuinely do have, but that you can explain how you're working on it. So, for example, if you had a weakness for typing and you wanted to get better at it, you could say, my weakness is I don't type very well, but I'm taking some classes, or I do exercises online to get better. And then definitely you don't say, I have an anger management problem. You should never say anything during a job interview that makes it sound as though you don't have control emotionally. Employers want their businesses to run smoothly, and they want their other employees to be safe, for everyone to get their jobs done. So they are not going to like the idea of bringing somebody into their organization who tells them that they might fly off the handle, get mad, and who knows what else. We recently talked about job interview attire, and I had these tips. So you should make sure your clothes fit properly. Make sure your clothes are clean. If you're wearing clothes you already own, check them out. Are they clean? Make sure they still fit. People can lose or gain weight, and you want to make sure that the clothes aren't too loose or too tight on you. Make sure your clothes are appropriate for the job you're trying to get. So you want your clothes to be appropriate for whatever the job type is, but maybe just a little fancier. So I use the example that if you were going to apply for a job where the perhaps uniform or dress code is that you wear a polo and khaki pants like you have to at Project Search, you might show up for your interview in khaki pants, but maybe a slightly nicer, fancier shirt, like a button-down shirt. Make sure your shoes are appropriate for the occasion, so no spiked heel shoes, the real tall heels on them, and no sandals or any kind of shoe that you can see your toes coming out, like flip-flops certainly, or anything like that. And then my final tip is that you do not have to spend tons of money on interview clothes. So you can go to secondhand stores, make sure before you buy anything, check your closet and see what you already have. You shouldn't buy anything if you've already got something that'll work just as well. We talked about what to do when a good job or internship placement goes bad. If things seem to start going wrong on the job, what would you do? It takes a lot of work just to get a job in the first place, so don't give up when tough times come along. Try your best to solve the problems you encounter before you start thinking about resigning. So in that session, we had 3 stories about people who were facing challenges at work and were thinking about maybe they needed to leave their jobs. So we talked about how you can do your best to try to make things better by communicating with your supervisor and your coworkers, trying to figure out what can maybe make things a little better for you so you won't feel like you have to leave. And the raised expectations, these are not the only rules and regulations and expectations, of course, but they are some major ones that I wanted to make sure everybody is familiar with. Now, violating any of these will be considered insubordination. Read the dismissal policy to remind yourself of just what the consequences are for insubordination. The expectations were cell phones and related items must be put away before class starts. So they can be put in your backpack if you brought a backpack, but they need to be not in your hand, not where I can see them, and not being used. So basically on a shelf and away from the table. Reading materials, the same thing. They need to be stored with your personal items on the shelves, and when we have a break time, you can get your reading materials back out and read those. And then listen to the instructor during class and wait to make comments and ask questions until the appropriate time. That means that when the instructor, yours truly, or a job coach, if a job coach is leading class, or a guest speaker, they are going to let you know when it's time to ask questions and make comments. If you don't meet this expectation, it will be considered insubordination, just like the other things. So be very aware. You will have a chance during class to ask your questions and to make comments, but it has to be at the appropriate time. And then a biggie here, at all times, be respectful of everyone you interact with. So that includes a lot of things in it. So there's a lot of ideas here, such as do not interrupt your peers when they're talking, be supportive of your peers, do not engage in name calling or bullying, do not argue with the instructor or job coaches, follow all instructions as given by department managers and Project Search staff. And then be flexible so that you can handle changes to your routine. There will be times, pretty much every intern has had to deal with this at some point or another, when there's a change in a department. Sometimes personnel change, meaning sometimes suddenly there's a new manager or new coworkers around who you must work with. And you have to be flexible about that. You have to be flexible as well if the order of your tasks changes and you end up having to do things in a different order than you're used to. Or maybe a task is no longer needed and you end up switching to a different one to replace that task. So a lot of different things can change and you have to be flexible and go ahead and do what is needed. That was a very brief overview of everything we've covered in the last couple of weeks. Just wanted to kind of get you thinking about all those things. And I would advise that if any of them are kind of fuzzy, if you happen to have missed any of the sessions where we discussed that material, go back and watch the videos. Any of those videos that you think you need to watch in order to remind yourself of what was covered. And they're all on the YouTube channel. I know you want to do well on the game show style quiz and review session. I'm really looking forward to the game. It'll be interesting to see who comes out on top